that Adam, a number of lawyers, absconded with his money. Anyway, at the end of the day, he won his case. So Shaba's a free man. He's able to cross into the U.S. That's how he makes his living. So that's a big win. So we're very grateful. And now he's turning the tables on them, and he's suing them for all of he's been injured physically, and he lost a lot. I worked on fundraisers for him, and he lost a lot. He almost lost his whole family because of it. But anyway, just to throw some positivity that we never gave up. And believe me, like I said, we went through, I want to say 5 different lawyers. And finally, we found somebody like an Ian, Michael Alexander. And no, seriously, it makes all the difference in the world, right? Anyway, so we got justice, and now, like I said, he turned the tables, and we're going after them for his damage, both physically and mentally. So I just wanted to put that out there and let you guys know. Thank you.
How about I stand over there? I might do that. And thank you for Barbara for hosting this great event. It's very inspiring. And perhaps mostly to Dr. Oksana Saviak, who invited me here tonight. And I said, not a chance, it's July. And then I found out I had to come because it's so important. My name's Rodney, and I worked for CBC and CTV for about 2 decades. I also wrote for the Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, Montreal Gazette. And I was with CBC, I was an investigative reporter primarily and producer in television and radio. And I went to work for CTV in around 96, and I was a foreign correspondent. So I held 3 bureaus. I opened their bureau in India, and I ran it for 3.5 years. I transferred to Jerusalem for over 3 years, and this is the thing that was wonderful. What's this? Did someone invite Trudeau? I was bothered by that out of the corner of my eye for a second. My last assignment, and perhaps most significantly, was China, because that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight. I first went to China as a very young journalist when in 1988. And in the winter of 1988, there was a number of student protests popping up. And I was there for about 2 weeks. And I was visiting with a number of other Canadian journalists who were living there at the time. And they said, oh yeah, there's a big student protest popped up here, and another one popped up. And I said, well, what's going on? They said, well, the students are a pro-democracy movement, and it's growing. It's all coming out of the university. It's all the intellectuals. It's all the young people. And eventually that led to, about 6 months later after I left, it grew into one giant demonstration in Tiananmen Square where there were tens of thousands of them in a sit-in. And that was famously ended with tanks and guns and batons. And it's, I'm sure Vince probably knows the physical training that a lot of the OPP have. They're probably not all black belts in Kung Fu. And every single one of the Beijing police are black belts in Kung Fu. And they can break your neck. And they did, many. I remember when I was doing a story over there, when I was stationed there, and there were North Korean North Korean escapees who were in China, and they were trying to get asylum, and one of the things they were doing was jumping over the walls into the embassies, and they had been in the Canadian embassy. So I said, perfect, I'm a young Canadian journalist here, I'll go over and we'll do the story. And the other journalists laughed at me. They said, you can't go and film that. They'll just come and take your camera. And I said, well, can you fight them off? And they all laughed. And they said, I'll give you the number of the Australian cameraman who's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. That happened swiftly. So that was the way a totalitarian regime ended a peaceful protest with a significant portion of the population that disagreed with them. Thank you. You can tell I'm getting parched already. So let's flash forward to 2022. Bless you.
Yeah, I need lots of blessings.
When I was in Ottawa, consoling the wife of my best friend who died suddenly 3 weeks after his 3rd COVID vaccine in front of his 2 sons, And I got a call from the Canadian COVID Care Alliance, who I'd been working in the very background, advising them on their media strategy. And they wanted me to go. They said there's this massive convoy coming into Ottawa. And I said, yeah, I'm actually thinking of leaving town because it's going to be a traffic snarl and I got to get out of here. And they said, no, we've got a documentary filmmaker riding with them. And a guy named Ben Hub. And he did a film eventually called Unacceptable, ? And he wanted me to film from the Ottawa perspective as they arrived. So I said, look, I got a cell phone here. I'm going to need a $15,000 budget to go buy cameras and sound and all this stuff. And they said, you've got it. Done. Go get it. And Ottawa happens to have professional video camera stores because of Parliament's there and all the press of the world are there. So I was able to get good gear, and I went down the first 5 days. I'm filming the thing. And by the end of that, the way they stopped it was extremely familiar to me, to what happened in Tiananmen Square. So we later learned in the inquiry from the testimony of Tamara Leach that she had actually negotiated the peaceful dispersion of 90% of the trucks. They wanted to go home. They were done. And the the Ottawa police actually, and the city of Ottawa had paper trails back and forth that they were going to let them go. So the police were blocking all the stoplights, all the intersections, and they were going to open these intersections and let them go. And some mysterious order came from the parliamentary police, in other words, the federal government's parliamentary police, of which that force cannot be that strong. Can't imagine, 100, 150 staff. But they took superior authority, told them to stand down, waited till the Emergency Act was invoked, and then came in with sticks and clubs. That was the first time I saw mainstream media show up down there, 25 steps outside their front door, was to film these people getting beaten. And I instantly understood as a journalist, first of all, I'd witnessed that they didn't come. I was out there with a camera interviewing truckers. My National Citizen Inquiry and testimony, I played some of it because I couldn't find a white guy at first. So I said, well, the government's called you all white supremacists. What do you think of that? Do we look like a white supremacist here? So, like one after another, right? So I just made it, mincemeat of them on this thing. And I thought, well, where are the other journalists? They're not here. They were inside with a couple of what we call talking heads inside a studio, accusing Tamara Leach of being a right-wing extremist. Instead of having Tamara on, they could have just brought her in. So I'd already witnessed that they'd moved from news gathering, the simplest thing, like they just delivered the biggest story on the planet to your front door. What do? You stay inside. I used to report on this stuff in India back in the mid-90s where the Betacam weighed 30 pounds and you had to go to a satellite feed point. There was one in every major city, so 5 in all of India. And feed the thing out for $5,000. Now you can do it all live on a phone. They still didn't do it, but they showed up to watch them getting beaten because that was the message. I understood they were now propagandists, and the most important thing was for Canada to see if you speak up against the government, you get beaten. And that's the exact same treatment we saw with the Tiananmen Square. Let's not forget they called it a massacre, what happened in Tiananmen Square. So that was in 1989. This was in 2022. Roughly 30, 35 years differential between where you had a totalitarian regime, how it treats dissent, and where you had Canada and how it treats dissent. It was the same. So I then went back to China in 2002 as the foreign correspondent for CTV. So I was assigned to live there. And immediately noticed a difference because my previous assignment was Israel. And before that it was India. So in India, once you get your, a journalist visa, I guess I had to enter the country and to stay there for as long as, visa allowed. I didn't have to come and go. But once you were in, you could phone up a cabinet minister and interview him in his bathtub if that's what he was doing at that. I mean, it was just so easy to get access to anybody. And in Israel, you just walk up to the checkpoint and there's the guys with the guns in there, and you just turn the camera on them and you look this way and camera's on them and they might come up to you and go, look, I got a situation. There's a sniper's nest over here. There's 25 kids throwing rocks. I'm not sure which one of these women and a perk guy is going to blow me up. Okay, that's reasonable. But that they would not headbutt me with a gun. They would make their case, and then you'd get out of their way. So then I get to China, and I'm told don't go down to the most obvious story where you can get great footage of Koreans jumping over Canadian embassy fence. There was an explosion at Beijing Beida University, which is the biggest technical university, like an MIT. Right in Beijing, there was an explosion in the cafeteria, and I had just come from Israel, where you would just immediately go. In fact, it happened at Jerusalem University. You immediately go and you film it. And none of the other journalists would be with me. They go, you can't go. They won't let you near it. So they've gotten to the point where the journalists don't even try anymore. This was 2002. You don't even try. And there was an amount of surveillance going on at the time as well. So, for example, CTV News had a driver assigned by the government, and his job was to spy on me, to report everywhere he drove me that day. And I knew that. And I still bought him lunch, and he went off to play badminton, and I got to know his grandchildren, and he was my spy. He was assigned to me. But they also had internet surveillance in its infancy. Now, no other country had this at the time. It was a very labor-intensive endeavor. So there was rumors of as many as 3,000 or 5,000 agents who would be on the computer simultaneously all the time, 24 hours a day, monitoring every website, monitoring keystrokes. You could do this by then. And they still had bulletin boards back then. This was the infancy of internet in probably the 1990s in North America. But these bulletin boards were something that you could just put up on a server. You didn't need a whole website for it. And they would be shut down very quickly if it was anything pro-democratic. So now flash forward to Canada in 2026, and we have a government that is enacting laws to do that exact same level of surveillance on us without our knowledge, without warrants. And this, to me, is beyond the end of democracy, because democracy requires all of us to understand what's going on. We used to get this from our media, CBC or CTV or 6 o'clock news or newspapers, both local, provincial, and national. And then we could all agree or disagree on it. And then we'd hold some antiquated thing called an election. And then we would fill up our parliament with representation from around the country. So all of that is over now. We don't have that in Canada anymore.
No.
Ottawa is no longer the heart of our democracy. It's like a democracy theme park where we can go and watch where they used to debate when it used to be real. Because what's happened is not only these journalism, it's everyone in this. I mean, I'm speaking to the converted here. You all know that they have switched from news gathering to propaganda and primarily are concerned with Health Canada's edicts. And the evidence of this, even since Oksana and Barbara asked me to speak for the last 2 months, there's been a measles threat story, big one, out of Prince George, BC, where there were 4 reported cases of measles testing, one of them active. First news story that day. It was a weekend. And I just thought, I'd like to look up how many people have syphilis right now in Prince George, AIDS, cancer, glioblastoma caused by their cell phone, for example. This was a ridiculous story. But since then, we've had a hantavirus outbreak. It came and went so fast. I don't know if you remember, but I recall that the Chief Medical Officer of Health in Canada said, hantavirus, it's on a cruise ship. Don't worry about it. You're fine. CBC, it was hours and hours on the radio with the hantavirus expert and hantavirus. And the next, how do we prepare for the next one? The next one's coming and all this stuff. And I'm like, on your own newscast, 14 seconds ago, was the top guy saying it's cool, don't worry about it. And yet they do this. They fuel it, right? There's an Ebola recently. There was an outbreak in, I don't know, Guyana, Zaire, someplace, and the guy got on a plane, and one man is being tested for Ebola. Okay? He doesn't have Ebola. He's being tested for it. He may be tested for 5, 6, 10 other things they're trying to rule out because he's got a fever. But that was the news. He's being tested for Ebola, and he's in Toronto. And I don't know that I ever heard a story to hear about the outcome of that test. But this is the fear-mongering that goes on. It's very specific to government policy on pharmaceuticals, fear around disease outbreak, and AI. That's the other one I've noticed immediately. As soon as AI became a thing, there's a new show on CBC Radio for anybody who knows cross-country checkup. There's a new one that's just called Ask the Expert. And all they do is they have somebody on who's pushing government policy of the week, who's an expert, and man, are they ever slick. They are the slick. Nobody says or ah anymore because they are the most professional, trained speakers selling whatever they're selling. And it's always about how AI is awesome and you better get used to it. And so the only reason I listen to CBC anymore is to figure out what they're trying to trick us into, because it's right there. It is no different than China Central Television, China Central Radio, Pravda. It is no different than the North Korean media. Well, it's not quite there yet. That's loudspeakers around the streets, but we'll get there. So if you look at now, I go back to the Tiananmen Square, and 30-some years later, we're beating them on the streets in Ottawa. And if you look at the surveillance of 2002 in China, and now we're entrenching that stuff into law in Canada, that's a shorter delta. That was only 20 years. So now if you look at what's in China, with their turnkey totalitarianism for any country to switch on, with their facial recognition technology, and we've all seen the videos of people walking across the streets, for example, in bigger cities, say Shanghai, Chengdu, Beijing, and Guangzhou, would be probably the population of America, almost, in those 4 cities. Certainly 4 or 5 times Canada. So Shanghai has 30 million people in it, right? So it's a big bloody town to get around. And if you're walking across the street, and I was in a taxi in Shanghai 3 or 4 years ago, and I was starting to get car sick, it was hot, and I needed to get out, and I saw a Starbucks, and I thought, boy, I think if I go in there and have something, I can normalize how my stomach feels right now. The taxi driver pleaded with me not to get out of the car, because even though we were at a stoplight, snarled traffic, I could have easily got out, nothing was moving, I could have easily walked through, paid him. But he said, no, you're not allowed to get out here, and there's cameras right there, and I'll get a fine sent to my house if you exit the vehicle now. So we had to go through the light and turn left and then exit the vehicle. It took me half an hour to get back, through the smog and everything to where I was going. But if people walk across the street, their own picture through the facial recognition comes on a screen before they can get across the street, and their name and the transgression of jaywalking and how much money has already been removed from their bank account. That's now in China. So how long before it's in Canada? By my new equation, it's 10 years. So 30 years to the violence, 20 years to the surveillance, 10 years to the complete, total control. And again, not unlike what Vince just said, it's for the common good. So I always say, beware the greater good, because who's deciding the definition of good in that? And who's to decide whether I'm included in the greater? So that's somebody else using that as an excuse. It's not unlike when I heard a man talking at one of the conferences where I was speaking at, and he was involved with people who were detransitioning, who had been tricked into changing their gender and then regretted it. And he was one of them. And he said, as soon as he heard the phrase, be kind, he said, that's what my groomers used to say when I was 3, 4, 8, 10. He was sexually abused his whole life, this poor fellow. And I thought, wow, he's a smart man dressed as a woman on a stage, but you know what? He was the smartest guy in the room that day. And he just said that instantly was, to me, a grooming phrase. All of us were being collectively groomed to submit ultimately to the vaccine, but the vaccine was just, to me, a tool of the control. I mean, if they'll do this, what else can we get them to do, right? So you don't have the journalism, which is not just the foundation of democracy, it is democracy. So if we can't all listen to the same news and agree or disagree on it and then go vote because the news itself is a lie, then we no longer have democracy. It's over. It's finished immediately. That one equation pulled out, it's gone. But now it gets worse, because we've had Trudeau in there, who was a puppet, near as I could determine, of the World Economic Forum. But now we have Carney, who's an architect of that World Economic Forum. He's one of the top 3 dudes. He's probably the only guy who wasn't born into it, 19 generations. So he's running the thing, designing the thing. He's been connected to the worst of the worst under Trudeau. He's been connected to the bank freezes. He's been connected to the crackdown in Ottawa. He's been connected to the mandates as an advisor. And now he comes in, and I always just have these questions as a journalist. Why would somebody who's retired from the head of the Bank of Canada, head of the Bank of England, one of the top economic jobs on the planet, running on nearly $1 trillion asset management company, why would he get his hands dirty in politics? unless he's coming to dismantle the country. First as a kleptocrat, a lot of these funds that are going over to Ukraine have been pointed out by a couple of major newspapers as first being given to Brookfield Asset Management, his company, and they'll send it over to Ukraine. So he's just enriching, and that's, when it's billions, they can have 1% of it. It's enough, to get stinking wealthy off it. So there's a kleptocracy involved. It's opportunistic, but I believe there's something greater happening here. That he stole his majority is another reason. It means our elections no longer matter, because we, as a collective, this brilliant idea of Canada with the elections and the ridings and the parties and the parliamentary democracy, and that house is supposed to be a representation of what Canada's thinking right now as a unified geographical boundary entity with all us people in it. And it did not deliver the Liberals a majority. I mean, that it delivered them anybody at all, it was only because they got rid of Trudeau, because we all know the polls were, the party was decimated. And then they brought in beautiful Carney, and he showed everybody he was a banker and you can trust me. And then it had gone right down to, the church ladies and the school teachers and the people who, are just reading their National Enquirers, maybe don't care much about politics. They were even down on Trudeau, right? So it was across the country. And then Carney saved it, swept it back. Okay, we can trust this guy. Trudeau's gone. So I believe that was people were tricked, but a lot of people were. But he still didn't get a majority. Unprecedented floor crossing. Now, how did he persuade them? I'll use the blanket phrase of persuade, but some of these social conservatives like Marilyn Gladu, who led the caucus against vaccines for the members of parliament who didn't want to get vaccinated. She is a staunch social conservative about gay marriage and abortion. All of a sudden, you know what? These Liberals are really great, and she goes over. So this is shocking, right? So I think it was 7 members he got between the NDP and the Conservatives.
One a month.
There's another one coming because they're going to make him a senator. So they're solidifying it a little more that way. What a great way to do it. And more than likely, I don't know this, but it makes no sense strategically unless the guy just barely won his election. So maybe there's a Liberal, maybe it was a close riding, so that's why he gets to be a senator. He's out of the way. Maybe they can win it fair and square now. So now they're making it more and more and more. So now he instantly, so where's the elbows up? Where's the, fix Canada? Where's all the promises? That's just gone. Instead, surveillance law. In addition to that, they have shut down committee debate. I saw Roman Baber, who's one of my political heroes, asking a question in committee where he said, I want to ask the Justice Minister a question because I think what he's about to do is illegal. May I ask the question? They said no. Not even allowed to ask a question. The Health Minister had come to talk about something conflict of interest, and before they could ask a question, another Liberal member in the committee said, I would like to move to adjourn early. They had just started. And the Conservative said, no, I'm asking a question. And he was shut down by the Liberal chair of the committee who said, there's a motion on the floor. The rules say you can't have a point of order. You need a vote. He goes, well, he just interrupted me and said he wanted to close the meeting. And we just vote. And then the Liberals all put their hands up and the meeting was over. So that's where we make our laws. So now back to my democracy theme park where they're all talking on the floor. The laws are really made in the committee where they weed out all the different parties' objections and they get down to something solid that can probably be debated publicly and probably pass. But that is all happening now behind closed doors, without debate, without dissent, and now the Liberals want to remove the cameras from the committee rooms so the Conservatives or any other parties or anybody who disagrees with them can no longer put it out on my social media so I can see those hot little juicy bits like I just described. So they want to end that. So they want to end so you can't see the laws being made, you can't participate in the laws being made, no matter how you vote, it's going to be a Liberal. So this is, I don't know if you know this, but China is a party parliament, okay? There's just the one,
Right.
but it's a party. It's the Communist Party of China, the CPC. So Canada now really effectively has a very similar makeup. We just have this one party, no matter that we didn't vote them in. They do not have a representative vote. Marilyn Gladu, by the way, the MP from Sarnia, was leading the charge for a private member's bill to enact a election. Should you cross the floor after you're elected, it triggers a by-election, and you got to go and explain it to your electorate. The chances of anybody winning that are about zip. And she was the advocate of that, and then she crossed. Oh no, that was a bad idea. We're not doing that anymore. So that's when somebody introduced the concept to me. I said, how did they bribe Marilyn Gladu? She was the toughest. She was like morally unwavering, right? And then somebody said, did you just say blackmail? Yeah, somebody said blackmail. And I thought, of course, Mr. Surveillance, like everybody's got a little something we're all ashamed of and nobody else knows. They found something. Maybe it entered a possibility that it's persuasion, bribery, or blackmail. It certainly isn't, you've been thinking wrong all this career of yours, right? It's not that. Something really ugly is going on there. And then she went on television and said, well, it was because I went up to Evan Solomon in the, another completely corrupt journalist, fired from the CBC for corruption. Now he's a minister of AI. God help us all. I mean, I also know Evan personally. I think it's ironic that artificial intelligence is his ministry, because I think he's been guilty of it his whole life. But that's my own observation. But she even, so why would she even name that guy? Like, that's a concocted story by far. Like, why would she implicate him in that? Unless that's a story they all cooked up between them. And you can just already see it, like in investigations, Vince. Your gut starts, your gut knows the answer before your brain does, and then your brain's got to go prove it. Journalism is the same way. So we have now journalism no longer functioning. We have government no longer functioning. We have them keeping secrets from us and passing surveillance laws. So we now live in the equivalent of China. The only difference so far in its progression is we can still be here and I can still talk so far. But some of these laws, like for example, if I say as a journalist, I saw that story where the sonar detected something like 315 graves underneath a residential school, and my immediate thought was, wow, what interesting technology. That'll allow them to go dig it up now. And it just never happened. So my strong suspicion is there's no graves there. Now, with this new law about denying residential school atrocities, could my language wind me up being charged? Now, if I just said it to you in your car, or the two of us were in the living room together, that's kind of allowed because who else is listening? But a group this large, I could be considered to be disseminating. If you're filming it over there and you post it, and then it's up there, and then somebody sees it, and then people go, yeah, look at this guy. Next thing you know, 3 million people, I'm getting a knock at my door. So these are bizarre laws. We already have some of the strongest anti-hate speech laws in the world. We already have defamation, libel, and slander. We have those things. We have criminal law. The anti-hate speech, the hate speech laws are under the Criminal Code of Canada. You can go to prison for saying stupid shit, like the Holocaust never happened, or they deserved it anyway, or any stupid stuff like that. And it's, really, you need to, anybody who says that stuff really probably needs to just be, hospitalized for a little while and watch. But no, you can actually get thrown to prison for that. So those laws exist. Why do we need more? Why do we need the surveillance law? Edward Snowden, who gave up the U.S. government for misusing the technology that he designed to spy on America, had to leave the country, is the most wanted man in the country because of what he exposed. What he exposed is they're watching us. They're collecting our data. In Canada, they're about to make that a law. So it was illegal, which is why Snowden had to hightail it out of there after outing them. It's now going to be law in Canada. No one else has a law like that. We're going to have that as a law. So this is not the country that anybody thinks it is. We can still go out our business. We can still have a barbecue. But it's coming, it's creeping, and it's getting faster and faster. So I'm going to shift to hope now, just so it doesn't all sound terrible. But one of the greatest things going on that I've thought, and I thought a lot about this coming down here, because really, my role in this, and we all have a role in this, My role is, I think, just to describe what I've seen. I mean, I was out there for with integrity as a journalist, watching stuff for years, and who knew that I was going to start to see it here, or who knew that I was going to wind up, at the filming for a documentary at the Truckers Convoy, or speaking at the NCI, or any of that stuff. I didn't know, but my role has been to enlighten people that this is the truth. You're not imagining it. Your gut and your brain know it together. It's real, and I've seen it from the inside, and I know how it works. And they're doing it intentionally, and all of this, what Carney's doing, is on the script of China. It's just like what Vince said. It's definitely on that script. They're doing the same thing. So, one thing is, Carney is not Canada. This room here, this yard, this is Canada. Okay? Trump is not America. Everybody with their elbows up, screw America, all this stuff. Have you been to America? It's really awesome. I got so many friends down there. I always love it down there. I can't believe the hospitality and the service and all the great places and things and everything. And nobody reminds me that much of Trump. And even his supporters can't even stand him anymore. Modi, the brutalist in India is not the Indians. I lived in India for 3.5 years. I lived in Israel for 3.5 years. But so many of my friends on the Palestinians and Israelis and hanging out together and all that, none of them were the killers and the be killed. And, none of them were doing that stuff. So the people, despite it, are the country. The people of China are not the dictators. They work around it. This is a clever bunch of people. They're like, these are the rules, work around it. Bribe this guy. Oh, they executed for bribery. Okay, we don't bribe anymore. We'll do this instead. They work around it. One of my great Polish friends, who Oksana knows very well, when somebody said to him, I think I can get a paper that looks real, that'll say I'm vaccinated, but I'm not vaccinated, he immediately said, I'm so glad to know that Canadians have figured out a system to get around the system. Because he came from communist Poland and he was raised in it. And that's why so many Eastern Europeans see this stuff so fast. They go, this is it. This is what they do. They tell you all have to do this. And then overnight, you're doing whatever they tell you. But if groups like this can still gather, and we can still talk, and we can still raise money, and we can still elect. Now, there's a lot of people saying we are not going to vote our way out of this, and it may be true. But if we can just be here and spread the word and talk, and at least we can still speak freely, and we can still tell what we know to be true. And if we can always still say what we know to be true, then the truth will always prevail. Because the truth is a powerful thing. It outlives all of us. And the lie that we're being told that we have a democracy and we have a government and we have a choice, this is a weak little thing that's flittering away. And something good will happen. I don't know what it is yet. But if we all get together and we all talk about this, something good will come of it. Yeah. So thank you all for coming here tonight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting Adams. And thank you for supporting the legal case. And please, like Jody said, donate. Even if it's $20, there's 100 people here. This is all important, right? This is all very important because our country is worth doing this for. Thank you so much.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I just have one question. You've traveled all over and you've seen China, India, all these places. So why do you think that these politicians are so hell-bent on doing this? Are they compromised, like you said, or blackmail? Or like, they've got children too. I don't understand. Like, are they ready to flee to the Bahamas? Are they got a place down there ready to go? Like, they're doing it to themselves too.
So
why?
He's asking why I think the politicians are hell-bent in pushing this totalitarian Canada toward a totalitarian system. The party system, as I understand it, is designed so that they take community leaders, people who are used to being looked up to in their hometown, and they send them to Ottawa and they put them in a room and they say, shut up. There's something called the caucus, and there's something in the caucus, the way the person who's in charge of making sure you shut up, his role, his job, his title is whip, right? So he's the party whip. And the reason they don't call him the party cuddly bear is because he's designed to whip you like an animal if you don't get in line. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. The parliament decided to have a single vote, which was unbinding and only for show, that China was exercising genocide against millions of Uyghur people in the northwest portion of their country, where it intersects with the stands, with Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, all that place. So these are Muslims, ethnically and religiously. And it was seen from space that there was these giant buildings that were housing 1 million men who had been removed from their homes and were undergoing thought retraining. There were some escapees who said that they had chairs and they were binding them to them and they were putting electricity into them. More consequentially, they were sending Chinese government functionaries to their homes to now take over the role of man of the house and live with the wives and raise the children. So a number of parliaments around the world had stood up and said, we condemn China for this.
And we did too.
So Canada was going to do that. Trudeau ensured that 100% of the MPs who were Liberal did not show up that day. So that's the control that the boss has over these guys. So nobody was able to vote with their conscience on something only that they had to do to say, you know what, I'm a good person. I think that's wrong. It's all fact. Nobody's making it up. It's all proven fact.
Sure.
But they still got them to not come. And they sent one cabinet minister to say the government disagrees with this motion. So that tells you two things, maybe three. It tells you that they're afraid of China, big time. It tells you that every MP is under the control of their leader. And as friends of mine asked me why I was going on about this while it was happening, which is a good 6 years ago, 7. I said, because if our government will not call genocide by its name, you can expect to see it on our soil.
Right.
That, I believe, is ultimately what they're capable of. If they won't say, this is dead obvious, all you people want to say that's wrong, we'll say it's wrong and get back to business. It didn't change anything, but you can be sure that the top people at the Chinese embassy in Ottawa were knocking on Trudeau's door saying, and then he told everybody else, not going. And so that's the system that's set up. That's what they're sent into. I had a friend, an old buddy from CBC who went into politics, and he was in Trudeau's government, and he talked to me about how he wasn't getting a cabinet seat. So he says, those are the cool kids. So the way he described it was like high school. Cabinet are the cool kids. He's not one of the cool kids. He's used to being a cool kid because he's Mr. Famous in Toronto, but he's a nobody in Ottawa. And he was a bit of a hothead, so they didn't want to put him in anyway. He kind of marched to his own drum, not getting in. So they look for compliance, they count on it, and the rewards are huge. I mean, let's face it. Like, Trudeau is a kleptocrat. Look at these ArriveCan, these billions of dollars, and that's in your future. If you're a Liberal right now, who knows what Marilyn Gladwell's going to get?
She's getting sued.
Yeah, she's getting sued by like 85 small claims, and they'll pay for her. It won't go anywhere. But I had that thought immediately. If I gave her money, I'd want her sued.
I want my money back.
Yeah.
Fucking right.
Anyway, you have a question?
Hi. My question here. Sorry. Is that okay? Yeah. My question here is: do you think Canada would be safe for all the retirees, like to retire in Canada, to stay in Canada, or to go abroad somewhere else?
Well, this could depend on how close you are to death. So ultimately, we all end that way. So if you're expecting to live another 10 or 15 years, you're fine. If you're expecting to live another 30, 35 years, it could get tight. And then retirement also, they're in control of that. You're only allowed to go for so long, and then you lose your pension if you're relying on that. So I do know people that are flying down to Uruguay, of all places, because apparently they didn't lock down. Tiny little country, just sandwiched between Argentina and Brazil. It's got beachfront, it's got the mountains, it's got the ocean, it's got culture, it's got history, it's got money, and it didn't lock down or impose mandates. It's got a favorable tax situation. Not that I'm selling it, but I do get a commission. Yeah, there's people going down and looking at that, and you know, you get a visa if you. It used to be like you'd have to put $300,000 or $400,000 in, so people would buy a house for that. I was in Ecuador last year, and there was a guy who told me that they've brought it down. They're so into they so want your money. They've brought it down to a $100,000 US GIC. The guy's getting 9%. So he says, I live for my 6 months on it, and that's what he does when he's down there. So the more and more people are doing that. But it's a big decision, you know, like if you're here and your kids and your grandkids and your friends and your neighbors, and who wants to go there just because they're mad at the government? That's the other thing. We can always be mad at the government, but you know what? Look around you here. The government's not here. We're doing this, and we have people who love us, and we have stores that we go to, and coffee that we drink in the morning, and a comfortable bed we go to sleep at night. We still have our country. No matter what they do, they will never be our country. Just remember that. Pick up the trash. You know, it's really safer. It's safe. So she's saying the people who don't think like we do, and how can it be? So, you know, we've all went through this, right? We've family members who go, huh? Good friends. We were always aligned. My lawyer, who I was working with, I was on the board of my kids' school, and I was in charge of renewing contracts with the teachers. And he goes, okay, well, we'll put the vaccine mandate clause in there. I said, what are you doing? No, I'm not putting that in there. Why wouldn't you? I said, well, because why would I, you know, everybody, I don't have to explain it. And he says, I said, why would you do it? He goes, because I represent 3 public health authorities and 5 private schools, and I read the Toronto Star and the Globe Mail, the National Post. And I said, you know, all of those, I got to tell you, are filtered through the same bias filter to get to you. And what do you know about it? And so anyway, we had that. I still needed the guy, so I stopped the conversation. I said, put it in, send it in a Word document so I can erase it and then finalize it. I had a reason to call him again last week on something. And he's sick as a pig. Just can't work anymore. And so is his wife who got the vax, and his son who got the vax, and they're all sick. And I just said, sorry to hear, you know, let's just get through this thing. So I can't account for, other than that chart that was a third of the people can't be hypnotized, right? So when you go to one of those comedian hypnotist guy, he spends the first part of his act going through the room, doing his little tricks, figuring out who he's going to get. So you're looking at me like that? I'm not going to come to you, right? Oh, I'm not going to go to you, lady. You'll be doing the chicken dance. So, but he knows the people. He's figured it out, right? So we're the third that can't easily be hypnotized. And then there's the third who are easily hypnotized. Those are the ones begging for it, right? Then there's the third in the middle that we have to get to, because they make us a majority. They're the ones who said no to the vaccine until they didn't anymore, until they're, whatever their thing, can't travel. I got a friend who lives out in the country, and when he comes into town, his buddies all go for a beer. He couldn't go and join them. So there's always another guy for work, and another, and these were all friends of mine who were listening to me, and they were going, I didn't want to do it anyway. Thanks, Rod. I know you know what you're talking about. Ultimately, they all got it. The one who just got both hips replaced, I think, regrets it. The one who dropped dead in front of his children, I'm sure he regrets it. Most of them I do know. Like, I have a small factory. I employ about 10 people. And because I was on the front end of this, figuring this out, I would go down onto the factory floor and tell them, look, at this vaccine's coming, okay? I don't get it, okay? Like, it's not. And then I told them, I said, why? I go, well, there's all these people died from the AstraZeneca in Europe, and then there's this, and then there's the Pfizer, and then there's all this stuff. And then I said, so there you go. So now you know. And the one guy follows me, and he goes, I just got it. I said, well, in that case, you're going to be fine, okay? What can we do at that point?
Get into the sauna. Then everybody
Yeah, there was all of that too. There was the saline discoveries. Certainly in Newmarket, there was a big discovery of 80,000 doses. There was one in Germany with 150,000 doses that were all saline. We all know those things. What I want to leave you all with is this is an encouraging evening for me. Pamela, do you have a question?
Actually, that was quite interesting. you touched partly on the question, and you've also spoken about it. How has this happened to like 6 billion people in the world got this COVID injection? So my question wanted to focus on how are people being persuaded? Now I'll tell you what I've thought of, and then ask for your comment on it. The typical strong arm techniques, like the Italian mafia: persuade, bribe, blackmail, threaten, kill the relatives. That's, those in varying order. That gets people to do things. And then we're moving into the psychotronic warfare with the electromagnetic frequencies. And you know that the nanotechnology that's been injected into billions of people and is being sprayed on us, that can also have mind control possibility, as well as the media, the television, subliminal advertising we've known about for decades. So how do we, knowing that there are at least the strong arm techniques of mind control, including propaganda, and the psychotronic MK Ultra, even the hearings down in the United States with Anna Paulina Luna leading the MK Ultra hearings, very, very sophisticated mind control techniques for decades. How do we reach that 30% that we need to reach?
They're all reachable. The 30% is movable. You just got to know who you're talking to, right? I was involved in a campaign to rid my little town of Collingwood of cosmetic lawn pesticides when my kids were young. I didn't want them walking home and falling down on it, getting sick. And with the product that I build, I go to medical conferences, and pesticides is a big, big problem with chronic health issues. And so a guy came up from the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, and they were big on helping little groups like mine who had never been before a town council before figure it out. And they said, okay, have you identified who's in favor? Yeah, okay, we got these 5 councillors in favor. Good. Have you identified who's against? Yeah, these 3 they're never going to. Okay, ignore both of them. Go in for the ones whose minds are open but haven't decided yet. Give all your time and energy to these ones. So figure out who the people are, and you know who they are. They're the ones that got vaccinated last. They're the ones that they've expressed regret. And there's so much more happening now that is not having anything to do with the vaccination. Although interestingly, it's coming through the theater. So I was at a play and it said, here's what the COVID-19 restrictions are. Like, there's a 19 for a reason on that, right? It was 7 years ago. So there's ways that they're getting it into us, and you have to figure out who those people are and maybe talk to them. Like, the surveillance stuff is enormous. They're setting up an architecture for something. And I think it's partially to shut down people like us from talking with each other on social media, shut down people like this amazing independent press industry that's come up. Rebel News has really led the way, but there's dozens of them now. I was just asked to be a judge on the Independent Press Gallery Awards, and I was amazed at how many people are out there doing this, who I didn't know, who are doing high-quality journalism. Those guys will all be targets of whatever this new surveillance rules are. They'll find something they did. Something they just said a little sideways. If a CBC person ever said something a little offside, they might have to come on the next night and say, oops, I was sorry. These guys, they'll be in lawfare for it because they can. I think that's what they're trying to set this architecture up for. It's to quiet dissent. And dissent of what? Of just the Liberals winning? No. There's some other plan. And it's probably as ugly as you can imagine. And Carney is not to be trifled with. Trudeau, I mean, look at him. He was dancing in a Katy Perry video yesterday, okay? With the most blatant attempt to prove his heterosexuality that he's ever shown the world. And meanwhile, Carney, this quiet man, beware the quiet man. He is a very, very dangerous individual. So people have to know this. And people have to become aware of it. Because much like those people who, I even know people who wouldn't get the vaccine who are saying, you know, I like him. I like that speech he made over whenever it was. Yeah.
Has anybody read his book, Values?
I heard him make a speech and use the word values 11 times in one speech, very like the other day. Yeah, values, 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 because truth doesn't matter, actions don't matter, surveillance doesn't matter, democracy doesn't matter, it's values. You don't have those values? We have laws for you. So, again, Talk amongst yourselves. Imagine if every person in this had another backyard with 80 new people. That's how it works. This is all we have now, right? We have our country for now. We have our property for now. We have our friends, and we can talk freely amongst ourselves for now. We have to keep it up.
We're the new virus.
We're the new virus.
Thanks very much.
Spread the word.